Once upon a time, there was a father and his son. The father's name was John, and his son's name was Timmy. They lived in a small village nestled in the countryside. John was a hard-working farmer who owned a small piece of land where he grew crops and raised livestock. He was a man of few words, but he loved his son very much. Timmy was a young boy who loved to explore the countryside and play with his friends. One day, John and Timmy were working in the fields. John was plowing the land while Timmy was running around, chasing after butterflies. Suddenly, Timmy tripped and fell, hurting his knee. John quickly rushed to his son's side and asked him if he was okay. Timmy was in pain, but he didn't want to worry his father. He tried to stand up, but his knee was too sore. John noticed his son's discomfort and decided to take him home. As they walked back to their house, John asked Timmy what had happened. Timmy explained that he had tripped over a rock and hurt his knee. John comforted his son and told him that everything would be all right. When they arrived home, John tended to Timmy's knee, applying some ointment and a bandage. He then sat down with his son and talked to him about the importance of being careful and paying attention while playing outside. Afterwards, John took Timmy to the nearby river, where they spent the rest of the afternoon fishing and enjoying each other's company. John showed Timmy how to cast a line and reel in a fish. They talked about life, and John shared stories from his own childhood. As the sun began to set, John and Timmy packed up their things and headed back home. On the way, they stopped at a local store to buy some bread and milk for dinner. Timmy was excited to pick out the bread and carried it proudly in his arms. When they arrived home, John cooked dinner while Timmy set the table. They ate together, talking and laughing about their day. John told Timmy how proud he was of him for being brave when he fell and for being such a good helper in the fields. After dinner, John tucked Timmy into bed and read him a story. Timmy fell asleep quickly, feeling safe and loved in his father's arms. The next morning, John woke up early to tend to his farm. Timmy wanted to help, but John told him that he needed to rest his knee. Instead, John gave Timmy some books to read and some paper to draw on. As John worked in the fields, he thought about how much he loved his son and how he wanted him to have a good life. He knew that he had to work hard to provide for his family and to teach his son important life lessons. Later that day, John and Timmy went for a walk in the countryside. They talked about their hopes and dreams, and John encouraged Timmy to chase after his passions and never give up on his goals. As they walked, they came across a beautiful wildflower field. John stopped to pick some flowers for Timmy, explaining to him that they were a symbol of love and happiness. When they arrived back home, John and Timmy sat down to enjoy a cup of tea. John told Timmy that he loved him very much and that he was proud to be his father. In that moment, Timmy felt a deep sense of love and gratitude towards his father. He knew that no matter what challenges he faced in life, his father would always be there to support him and guide him along the way. And so, John and Timmy continued to live their lives together, always growing and learning from each. Part 2: Father and Son Bonding. Once upon a time, there was a father and his young son who lived in a small village. The father was a hard-working farmer who spent most of his days working in the fields. His son, who was just starting to learn basic English, would often accompany him to the fields to learn from him. One day, as they were walking through the fields, the father spotted a crow flying in the distance. He pointed to the bird and said, "Look, son, a crow." The boy looked up and replied, "Crow, Dad." The father smiled and continued on with his work. As they were working, the father noticed that his son was struggling to keep up with him. He stopped and asked his son if he was tired. The boy nodded his head and said, "Yes, Dad, I am tired." The father knew that his son needed a break, so he sat down with him under a nearby tree. As they sat there, the father looked up at the sky and pointed to the sun. He said, "Son, that's the sun. It gives us light and warmth." The boy looked up and said, "Son, Dad." The father continued, "And do you see those clouds over there?" The boy looked where his father was pointing and said, "Clouds, Dad." The father smiled and said, "Yes, clouds. They bring us rain and make our crops grow." The boy looked up at his father and said, "Dad, why do we work so hard in the fields every day?" The father thought for a moment and said, "We work hard so that we can provide for our family. We grow crops that we can sell to make money to buy food, clothes, and other things we need." The boy thought about this for a moment and then said, "I want to help you, Dad. I want to work hard too." The father smiled and said, "That's great, son. I'm proud of you." From that day on, the boy worked hard in the fields alongside his father. As they worked, the father would teach him new words and phrases in English, and the boy would repeat them back to him. They would take breaks together and sit under the tree, looking up at the sky and talking about the world around them. As the years went by, the boy grew into a young man. He had learned a lot from his father, not just about farming and basic English, but also about hard work, determination, and the importance of family. One day, the father fell ill and was unable to work in the fields. The young man took over the work and continued to provide for his family. He would visit his father every day, bringing him food and medicine, and spending time with him. One day, as the young man sat with his father under the tree, he looked up at the sky and pointed to a bird. He said, "Dad, do you remember when you taught me the word crow?" The father smiled and said, "Yes, I remember." The young man continued, "Well, now I know more words in English than just crow. I can speak fluently and read books." The father looked at his son with pride and said, "I'm so proud of you, son. You have grown into a fine young man." The young man smiled and said, "It's all thanks to you, Dad. You taught me everything I know. And now, it's my turn to take care of you." The father smiled and said, "I know, son. And I am grateful for all that you do." From that day on, the young man continued to work hard in the fields and take care of his family. Part 3. Father's Dream for Son. Once upon a time, there was a father and son who lived in a small village in the countryside. The father was a farmer and the son helped him with the farm work. They had a small piece of land where they grew crops and raised livestock. The father was a hard-working man who believed in the value of education. He had always wanted his son to go to school and get a good education so that he could have a better life than his own. The son, however, was not interested in school. He preferred to be outside, working on the farm and playing with his friends. One day, the father sat down with his son and had a heart-to-heart talk. He explained to him why education was important and how it could help him in life. The son listened attentively, but still wasn't convinced. The father decided to take a different approach. He started taking his son with him to town on market days. They would sell their produce and the father would point out the different things that people were buying and how education could help them make better choices. The son started to see the value in education and decided to give it a try. He went to school and found that he was actually good at it. He worked hard and eventually graduated with honors. The father was proud of his son and knew that he had made the right decision in encouraging him to get an education. He also knew that his son would have a better life because of it. As the years went by, the son went on to college and eventually got a job in the city. He visited his father as often as he could and helped out on the farm whenever he was home. One day, the father fell ill and had to be hospitalized. The son rushed back to the village to be by his side. He spent every day at the hospital, taking care of his father and making sure that he was comfortable. The father was grateful to have his son by his side during his illness. He realized how much his son had grown and how proud he was of him. One evening, as they sat together in the hospital room, the father said to his son, "I am proud of the man you have become. You have achieved so much and I am glad that I was able to be a part of your journey." The son replied, "I am grateful for everything that you have done for me. Without your guidance and support, I wouldn't be where I am today. I love you, Dad." The father smiled and said, "I love you too, son." The next day, the father passed away peacefully in his sleep. The son was devastated but knew that his father was no longer in pain and was now at peace. He took over the farm and continued his father's legacy. He also made sure to pass on the importance of education to his own children, just like his father had done for him. The father and son story is a reminder of the importance of family, hard work, and education. Even though they had their differences, they always had each other's back and supported one another. They had a special bond that nothing could ever break.